If you're just a technologist and you're cranking out code, you're not an entrepreneur, you're a hobbyist. Yes, this is so important. This is what founders do.
I was thinking one of the things I really want to talk about was the developer board.
Technical advisory board.
Technical advisory board. The TAB, the technical advisory board. I feel like that's one of the huge topics.
Absolutely it is.
I feel like.
I think that's probably the most important concept in the book and the one I get the most questions about.
Yeah, because I feel like most people aren't doing this. And
they should.
They should be.
In fact, not most. Everyone should execute a technical advisory board.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to.
Yeah. Do you think this is like one of the biggest reasons that startups fail?
Absolutely. No, the biggest reason, is this part of the interview?
Well, I was actually thinking it could be, yeah.
Sure.
I feel like that would actually be our soundbite. Like, the biggest reason.
The biggest reason developer-facing startups fail is they're not listening to developers. That sounds kind of obvious, right? Okay. But what's actually hard about it is that if you're a developer and you found a startup to solve an important developer problem, your natural inclination is to write code.
Yes.
That's what developers do.
Yeah.
Okay. And you put stuff out there and you want your users to use it and they use it and you write more code and they use the code, right? Where in this formula are you talking to the developers and are the developers talking to you, right? It's not going to happen naturally unless you make it happen. And so after decades of working at it, right, I finally put together the pieces and figured out, okay, how can I create a system that is going to give me feedback in a way that's actually valuable to the people that I'm working with?
Yeah.
And it's a lot of different pieces that all came together to form what I call a technical advisory board. Now, here's the crazy thing about tabs. I could talk about tabs all day, okay? Is that number one, they're not technical. Number two, they don't give advice. And number three, they're not a board, okay? It's just the technical advisory board is what it's called.
Yeah.
Okay. So number one, because lots of people have tabs, right? Yeah. They think, okay, I know some smart technical people that can give me advice, and my last boss thought I was amazing, and I want to get technical advice from them. And my dissertation advisor, I'm going to call them up and they should give me technical advice. So this is what they think goes into an advisory board that is technical. But that's not what a technical advisory board is about, okay? You start with the problem first. I can look at the camera, I can look at you.
Yes.
Start with the problem first, okay? And then you want to talk about the problem with as many developers as possible. This sounds so obvious, but it's hard. You have to figure out what's the way you're going to do this, right? And you need to come up with some assumptions about who is going to have this problem. And then you need to reach out to people who might have the problem. If they have the problem, they might respond to you. And then you want to talk to them about the problem. And that's hard. Yeah. Why is that hard? Because you're a developer, okay? Yeah. You've thought about the problem, you've thought about a solution to it, and then you spent years thinking about your solution. You think about different approaches, you think about why you're selecting the one you're selecting, you think about the obstacles, you think about how you overcame the obstacles, you think about all the different aspects of your solution, you think about the different trade-offs you made, the different design decisions you made, right? What you learned across the way. Your mind is full of how it works. Okay, but that's not what developers want to talk about. It's what you want to talk about, but it's not what they want to talk about. What developers want to talk about is the problem. Okay, and that's what you need to talk about.
Yeah.
You need to talk about the problem with them. And most developers, believe it or not, are eager to talk about the problem. They're not so eager to talk about how your product works. Okay, because they have problems. They have severe problems. All developers have problems.
Yeah.
And guess what? They've tried to talk about it with people and no one else cares, okay? Their partner doesn't care. Their boss doesn't care. Their kids don't care, right? and you get them on Zoom, and you're a startup founder, which immediately you have some level of credibility, right? And you care about their problems, they won't shut up, right?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of the startup founder needing to understand the problem deeply and developers needing to talk about the problem deeply. Just get together and do this.
Yeah.
But it's so hard because it's not natural for anyone.
Yeah. So playing that back, it's like developers actually do want to talk to you about a problem.
Yes.
And that's what you need to spend a significant amount of time.
The developers aren't going to be reaching out to you, though.
Yes.
Right? That's not their job.
Yeah.
Their job is to solve the problem, right? It's your job to find these developers and ask them about the problem, and then listen to them when they start talking about the problem.
So how do we assemble this team, these developers that we talk to? Do we talk to them on an ad hoc basis? What do you advise?
Thank you for that puffball question. Okay. The question is how do you assemble them, right? And the first rule I'm going to tell you is don't assemble them. Okay. Even though I call it a board, you actually want to have lots of conversations one-on-one. Okay. You never want to interview two people at the same time, because all that happens is the faster person will talk and the other person will just nod their head or nod off or will lose focus, right? So when you execute a technical advisory board, you're in the idea harvesting business, right? You want to listen and capture everyone's ideas, which means that you need to interview people one at a time, because if you interview them two at a time, you'll lose half the ideas. Not all the ideas are going to be great, but in order to find the great ideas, you have to listen to them all. Okay, so there's no assembly. All tab interviews are done one-on-one, okay? And then how do you find people? Well, to be honest, LinkedIn is great.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone you ever want to meet is there, and their resume is on LinkedIn, right? So you need to come up with some hypotheses. I mean, when I say you, I'm assuming you're a founder of a developer-facing startup, right? So you need to come up with some hypotheses about who's influencing the adoption of your technology, right? A wide range of job titles. And companies and types of companies and countries, and then go look for them, right? LinkedIn is great for this.
And when you say influence, I guess you're saying that specifically because it's not just...
It's not just developers. Yeah, that's another tricky part, okay? So the metaphor that I like to think about is that if you're going to get your technology adopted by an organization, right, it's like picking a lock. Every cylinder is at a different setting, and you need to find the correct setting to open each cylinder, and if all of them are open, then the lock will open. If you miss one, the lock stays closed. Okay, so any decision to bring technology into an organization is going to go through multiple people with different job roles. Okay? The problem is if you just talk to one person who loves what you do, but you don't talk to someone who has the budget, someone who is in charge of security, someone else who's in charge of network administration, perhaps, right? Then their cylinder is closed and they're going to block this new technology coming in. And the symptom of this is you have good meeting after good meeting with the person who wants to bring you in, but nothing ever happens because the people who are blocking it, you're not talking to. And they're happy. There are lots of people who are happy to block technology forever. It's like, no, I'm not going to let any of these things come in. They upset, the balance of the project, and there's nothing in it for me.
Yeah.
So
they're not early adopters.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to have a value proposition for everyone involved in bringing your technology into an organization, and you need to be talking to them, right? And the only way to construct a value proposition is to understand what the problems of that unique role are.
Yeah.
And the only way to understand what those problems are is to talk to people in that role.
Yeah. One of the questions I have on this is that I've tried to do a lot of user research from before, like where I have like a hypothesis and I'll line up, say 10 interviews. And maybe the first, what I often find is that you get very mixed like reactions to the problem and stuff like that. Is like, how do you try to find, you know, like say someone's like, yeah, this is actually a real problem. Let me show you how I do this. Blah, blah, blah. Like love talking about that space. And then someone else is like, I don't care at all about that. That's not a problem for me. That,
Yeah.
and do we just discard that person doesn't join the tab? Or do we say, oh, that's actually, let's look at what they are, what problems they do have. And then maybe we almost like change.
That's it. Everyone has problems. And absolutely, if you have a product that solves a problem for half the people necessary to bring it into our organization, but does nothing for the other half, it's going nowhere.
Yeah.
Okay. You need to work with, quote, the other half, whoever they may be, understand what their problems are, and come up with a value proposition for them as well.
But what if it's like, let's say I was like working with someone that's like, I'm trying to make it easier to like process for developers working with video pipelines or something. And then the first person I speak to is like, yeah, this is like, we do this, it's like on fire. And then the next person I speak to is like, we don't do any, actually. We don't do that. Like, is it like, within that sort of thing, how would I like bring it so it's like relevant to that person? Or would I still like discard them?
So first of all,
I shouldn't say discard anyway, so it's a bad chosen word.
What I recommend, and this is a key problem because everyone's an engineer and you want to talk about the product.
Yeah.
It's burning. You need to talk about
so
it
I'm
so
already
much.
doing that when I'm saying it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you gotta stop talking about the product and start talking about the problem.
So how would you, for that specific case, like how are you? Like,
Okay, this
maybe
is
there
what
no
I
specific-
recommend.
Okay.
This is what I recommend, is that you come up with a list of questions ahead of time, okay? And you ask exactly the same question to everyone you get a tab interview with.
Yeah.
And my favorite question is what I call the magic wand question.
Yeah.
It's not original to me. I mean, I read it in Cindy Alvarez's book. She wrote the book, Lean Customer Development 10 years ago. Great book, okay? And the question is, if you could, this is great. So in an interview, I can just like tease people out. I'm about to tell you like the best question ever. Wait. No.
If you ask this one question, we need the
This one
sound bite.
question. If you could wave a magic wand and change anything about how you do the problem, right? What would it be? Don't worry about if it's possible, just anything.
Okay.
And then you shut up. Okay? And people will think. And what you're doing is you're resetting the frame. You're no longer discussing a product that you may or may not have developed. Okay? Now you're changing the frame in that person to be, okay, something about this. What would I change if it could be anything? Okay? And half the time they won't have a good answer, but half the time they will. Okay? And then you follow that up with, if I could deliver that, how would that change your life? Because the answer to that second question is what you're actually selling. Right, to use a crazy example. So Steve Jobs had this quote about Henry Ford, right, which may or may not be true, which is when Henry Ford said, Henry Ford was supposedly said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, okay? But think about it in this context. If people said, yeah, what could you change? I want my horse to be faster. And then you ask them, if I could deliver a faster horse, how would that change your life? Okay, and then you think about it in the time frame of Henry Ford 100 years ago, and people could say, well, I could live in the country and work in the city, or I could get my goods to market, 10 times faster, right? These were what people wanted from a faster horse. And if you came up with another way of delivering those same benefits, then people would buy it. So that's why you need to understand, what is the change in life you're going for? Right, I could deliver 10 times as much video in a day as I do right now, or 100 times, or cut the processing time by 1,000x. Right, now you know what people are willing to pay for. Right, so those are my two most favorite questions.
Yeah.
And I've got a third question, my third most favorite question, which is, what change is going on in the world that makes what we just described more valuable than it was 5 years ago?
That's a good question.
Okay, it is a good question, Because what you're looking for, you want to create urgency in your users. Not fake urgency, like, oh, sales need to close this thing or the price goes up, but real urgency. And real urgency comes from the fact that there are always trends going on that are making people's problems worse. And you want to articulate the one trend that is making their life a little bit worse every day, and that if they don't address it, one day it will be catastrophic, because they are doing fine without your technology yesterday, right? They're in a job, they're delivering in their job. The fact that they have a job is proof that they are effective at their job. And yet you're telling them you're not going to be able to live without this technology tomorrow. You're asking them to make a huge jump in belief, right? So you've got to reconnect this with something they know to be true, which is that there is this big change going on in my industry. And the problem I'm working on is getting worse every day. And I can continue to ignore it, but I can't ignore it forever, right? The catastrophe is just around the corner.
Okay, this is amazing. So I'm just playing this for myself. I hope everyone else finds this useful, but at least this is very useful for me. So let's say I'm looking at like video processing. I understand that I'm not like solution, but I probably want to talk to people that are doing video as developers, using video in some way. And I would speak to some amount, which I'm sure we'll speak about in a second, but some amount of developers and ask them, one, your first favorite question, which is,
if you could change anything about video processing, video development, however you want to phrase the question, what would it be? Don't worry about if it's possible, anything.
And I listen to this.
Yeah.
And then I say, if we were able to do that,
how would that change your life?
How would that change your life? Okay. So the first one is the problem that I want to solve for them. The second one is how I present that to
what they want to buy.
Yeah.
Right. Why would they be interested in improving how they do video processing? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea why?
I think the thing that I'm working on is just making it easier. It's just like saving them a ton of time.
Okay.
Oh no.
That's air being sucked through teeth there.
Okay.
I really hate the word easier.
Okay.
It's not the worst word, but it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand that.
As a developer, when a vendor claims they're trying to help do something easier, it's like, I don't believe you at all.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I see the word easier and it's not immediately backed up by a testimonial from a developer, not only do I not believe you, but your credibility has decreased, that you couldn't come up with something more specific about what you do.
Yeah. So I guess it would be more like making sure that FFmpeg is available. It's, wrangling with S3. It's like making sure there's enough memory to process the video.
That's better. It's better. Okay. But anyway, let me tell you, I've already using my worst word, which is better.
Okay.
Okay. Never use the word better. Just sloppy thinking.
Okay.
But for each of those examples you can come up with, can you quantify it? Quantity numbers make it real. Okay. But it's still only half real. It's only actually real when a developer says it.
Yeah. So.
Because here's the essential problem. What gets the heart of everything I'm doing. Okay. You may be a talented open source developer. You may have written books. You may have given talks, right? People believe what you say. But now you're a vendor. Okay. Your credibility has suddenly dropped to zero.
Yeah.
Because every other developer assumes correctly that you're trying to sell them something.
Yeah.
And we know how to deal with people trying to sell us something. So it's like, nah.
Yeah. Close down.
Right? And so if you're a vendor, you can make assertions, but don't think people will believe them just because you're making them, especially if you're claiming you're better or easier. Okay. But the flip side of that is that developers don't lie to other developers. Right? You've been to a meetup or a hackathon, and someone gets up there and says, I want to talk about my project, but before I tell you what it does do, here are the 10 things it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because no developer ever wants to be accused of exaggerating the capabilities of their project.
So when you do say something and you back it up,
Pack it up with social proof.
So,
For developers, social proof is the only proof. You can give demos, till you're blue in the face and explain how it works, and you're still lying.
yeah,
But if a developer said it, then it's true.
that resonates with me. I recently started using Cursor, and it was only because 3 or 4 people pretty much implored me to use it. I was like, oh, it must be good.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And so many people, they mistake their assertions for actual proof. No one believes your assertions.
If I say something, no one's
It's
going
false.
to believe it.
If you say something as a vendor, it's false.
Yeah,
If you say something as a developer, it's true. It can be the same thing.
yeah. And I guess especially if it's a developer that they know, like a
Yeah.
respected OSS developer.
And that's the amazing thing about social media is you can actually influence people, and then the people you influence can influence people they know.
Yeah,
Right? Social media is a great gift for developers, which leads into another whole topic.
yeah,
Developers are the most social profession ever. And this comes as a shock, right? Because most people, they understand the stereotype of the lone developer,
Yeah.
right? With the weekend projects.
basement dwelling.
And while it's true that many introverts become developers, okay, it's also true that to be an effective developer, you have to communicate with other developers.
Yeah,
And every developer that's out there has problems. And the first thing they think about when they see a problem is, I'm not the first person to have this problem.
yeah,
Right? I'm going to do, I'm either going to search or I'm going to ask ChatGPT, right? Or look in developer social media and see who else has had this problem and how have they attacked it,
yeah,
right? Every developer I know has at least 2 screens up, right? People don't develop on one screen anymore unless you're on a laptop in a canoe or something, right? But still, right, one screen is the code screen and the second screen is the answer screen.
yeah,
And you are looking for answers from what other developers have already done to solve this problem.
true.
And you're going to spend more time on the answer screen than you are on the code screen, especially if you're using Sourcegraph or
Shout out Sourcegraph.
yeah. Yeah, full disclosure, I was the first VP of marketing at Sourcegraph. Great product.
Yeah. And you have to say that because developers always have to be truthful, right?
Yes.
Full disclosure. Actually, we didn't do an intro. So,
Intro.
hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling DevTools. I'm joined today by Adam Frankl, who goes by the name occasionally of Triceratops because you were the VP of marketing at 3 different.
I was the first VP of marketing at 3 developer-facing unicorns.
So,
JFrog, 3 horns. Yeah, JFrog, Sourcegraph, and Neo4J.
And you have now written a really good book, which if you're watching the video, you can see up there, Developer-Facing Startup, which is really good. And I think everyone should read it because from my perspective, here's my social proof, is that you've done a very good job at putting like formulas to something that feels very non-formulaic. And I can say that as someone that's now interviewed like 100 people about how to grow developer tool startups. I often feel quite muddled because people have very different advice and, there's many ways to actually approach it. And what I like is that you've created a very like systematic approach that someone can follow and succeed. And I'm sure maybe there are other ways to do it, but I think it's incredibly good to actually just have a process that you can follow, especially as devs. We like processes, we like documentation.
Yes, yes, and yes. So yeah, that's why I wrote the book. Well, actually, I can talk. First of all, the whole book is designed to be a process. And in fact, I'm turning it into a course. So next month, in October 2024, I'll be launching what I call Founders Academy, which is a 12-week course for founders of developer-facing startups. The reason why this exists is developers are different, okay? And all of the strategies for selling products to consumers or selling products to business executives don't work for developers, okay? But there are strategies that do work. They're just different. And so the problem that I see over and over again is that developer-facing startups will bring in a highly successful go-to-market team, a VP of marketing, a VP of sales, that has succeeded in selling to business executives. And the first thing they're trying to do is duplicate the programs that have succeeded for them in the past, maybe over and over again. And they don't work with developers because they don't understand developer culture. And 6 months later, they throw up their hands and they say, developers hate marketing and the company hasn't advanced, right? And then the founders are left saying, back to square one, right? Where we're not getting adoption, okay? And this is a really important problem to solve. And let me tell you why it's important. Why is it that I do what I do? Because that this is the age of software, right? I don't think anyone doubts that. And yet, software still sucks. And I ask myself, why is software still so bad? It's not like we don't have the smartest people in the world working on it. I think we do, okay? The answer is the tools are still bad. So then I began thinking, why are the tools still so bad? The smartest people in the world use these tools. Why aren't they making better tools? And the answer is they are making better tools, but they don't understand how to get widespread adoption of these tools. So that's when I thought, okay, if I can do one thing, if I can help developers creating tools for other developers get widespread adoption of their tools, right, then I can reduce the suckiness of software in the world and everyone will be better off. So that's my personal goal, right? I need to make as many developer-facing startups successful as possible in order to accelerate the change in software that we all want to see. That's it. If I do that, then I'll retire.
Yeah, I think that's actually an incredible goal. And I definitely resonate with it. I feel like, especially as like developers are making the world better, if you believe that, which I do, it's like giving them the tools they need to do a job better. And as you said, adoption is.
Yeah, and I'm certainly never claiming that I've figured out the only way to be successful. All right, there are many ways to be successful, but I have figured out some baseline truths, right? And you can apply them, you have to customize them for everyone's unique situation. But here is some fundamental things that you need to do if you want a product to be widely adopted by developers.
Yeah, and I think that for most people who are building a developer tool startup, they probably don't really care, in a sense, if they get like how their product becomes widely adopted. It's more like they care about the problem that they're solving. And so if you can just give them a thing that works, it's like, they're not gonna be like, oh no, I don't like this style. I want my own style that's like,
Great, make your own style. But there are certain truths here, right? And there will be exceptions, right? But if I think back in my career, I've actually been a co-founder or early executive at a dozen venture-backed developer-facing startups.
Interesting.
The first 9 of them all failed.
That's also, I feel like that makes the work so much more interesting as well.
Yeah. And well, I wouldn't say they all failed. Some of them were pretty successful, but they were not
like unicorns.
Well, Rational Software, they were bought for $1 billion by IBM. This was like 30 years ago. So I guess they were pretty good.
But there wasn't
by today's standards,
there wasn't like a 4-horned dinosaur that you wanted to.
No, there is a 5-horned dinosaur, but there was no 4-horned dinosaur. But no one knows the Quinteratops or whatever. It's like Triceratops. I'll stick with it.
Yeah.
All right. So, but here's the difference. The difference between the ones that succeeded. Well, actually, let me give you more of a story, right? So I'll give you my personal story. How did I end up here in this living room in San Francisco? Right? Is that I'm a former developer. I haven't written code professionally in many years, right? But I started off writing code. I have an engineering degree. I worked for Lockheed Skunk Works writing code for the F-22.
Which is super cool and the sort of thing that should also be its own podcast. But anyway.
Its own. Lockheed Skunk Works is a crazy place. And it is an interesting angle because you compare Skunk Works with today's startups and they have some things in common and some things are entirely different. Okay, I can get to that later if you're interested. Okay. But while I was there, we had a presentation from the CEO of a DevTools startup, and I told told him, says that we like the tools, we're going to buy them, but you don't really know how to talk to developers. And that's a crazy comment. I was like 25 years old. And that crazy comment turned into a conversation that turned into a job offer that I took. And I became that startup's first product manager, right? That was about 30 years ago. And ever since then, I've spent the last 3 decades studying how developers adopt technology. And I've gone through many different phases in my career, right? The first phase was, okay, you just need to be really clear about what you're doing, right? Because we're engineers, we're selling to other engineers, right? Let's describe how it works. That was the first thing I tried. It didn't work. And yet, I tried it over and over again. I thought if I just try harder, it'll work. It didn't work, okay? Then a big event in my career was the HBO series Mad Men. I love this series. Have you seen it?
I've seen some of it.
To me, it was absolutely amazing.
Don Draper, right? Is that
Don Draper, yeah. And I had this brilliant idea. Okay, this is what I'm missing, right? Marketing is supposed to be about being clever.
Yeah.
And no one was more clever than Don Draper. And so I began adding cleverness to everything I did. Clever campaigns, clever taglines, clever websites, right? And believe me, I was clever. I could sit in the conference room and be clever with the best of them. But the problem was, it didn't work, okay? And I would try and be more clever. It still didn't work, okay? But I did this for years. Then Steve Blank came along, right? And he really changed everything, right? His first book, 4 Steps to the Epiphany, which is almost unreadable, but it was still an amazing book.
Yeah.
And if you take the gist of that book, right, what he recommends, I also took his course, right, is get out of the building and talk to customers. And so I thought, okay, what if I got out of the building and went and talked to developers, right? And for someone who had spent years being clever in conference rooms, this was quite a revolution. But I said, okay, I'll try it. Then Epiphany, and it worked, okay? And the more I talk to developers, it's hard to talk to developers, so I figure out ways to do that, and how do you find them, and what do you talk to them about? How do you think about what they're telling you, right? And it took a lot of trial and error to figure out a good way to do this, but all of the best ideas for how to market and promote and sell developer tools all come from users, right? So part of the hard part is being able to sift through everything developers tell you and say, this is a really good idea that can scale, and this one perhaps not. But at the end of the day, right, what's the one lesson here? You can skip paying $20 for the book. Talk to developers. That's it. Talk to developers. Now, if you don't know how to do that, or you think you need some help in how to do that, then you can spend $20 and buy the book. That's it.
Yeah. That's amazing. And so we're kind of bringing it back to the stuff we were talking about with like the technical advisory board. That is how you,
that is how you do it. Okay. But first of all, there's so many different aspects of this, right? The first aspect that I want to communicate is you don't pitch people and say, let me get on Zoom and show you my product. Okay. That sounds awfully tempting. No one wants to see your product, okay? The way that's interpreted is, okay, this is a sales call. This is a cold call, which no one wants to be interrupted. It's a bad use of developers' time. You're going to show me your product in the hope I'm going to buy it, or if it's free, adopt it. And it's like, this is a sales situation, and I know what to do in sales situations, okay?
Run away.
Nothing, and I don't give you any information, right? Because I know that we're actually negotiating, or we're about to be negotiating. Anything I tell you will be used against me. Okay? So don't get into premature sales situations. And so instead, right, one of the rules I've learned is they can't buy anything, so don't ask them to buy it, right? But they can give you advice. So let's ask for advice, right? And also, you don't want to have a one-off meeting. You want to have a relationship.
Yeah.
So the way I structure a technical advisory board, the way I teach people to do this, is you ask for a 30-minute meeting once a month for 6 months. Okay, and each aspect of that is really important. First of all, if the problem is important to people, they have 30 minutes a month.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no one that says, I can't fit that into my schedule if the problem is important to them, right?
So it's a good filter.
Yeah.
for you to understand if it is an important
Yeah,
problem. Because if they don't agree to that,
then it's not important for them.
Yeah.
It's a good thing for you to learn that if no one will ever take a 30-minute meeting with you, then you are not attacking a problem that's important to anyone. Time to rethink what your startup is about.
Yes.
Okay. But it's also important that this is not a transactional call. This is a relationship. That's why you want to say, I want to do this every month for 6 months. Okay. Because they're not going to trust you the first time, first call. But by talking to them over time and by bringing valuable information to your tab members, you can establish a trusted relationship. Now, at the same time, though, you're not getting married, right? You say right up front, it's for 6 months, right? And then we're done, right? Yeah. I'm not going to, be too embarrassed to tell you 8 months later that we need to call this off. No, we're going to meet once a month, 30 minutes for 6 months, and then we're done. And it's enough time for people to actually tell you what they're thinking.
I really like that, actually. And how many people would you typically?
That's a great question. I recommend when you're starting off that you aim for 50 people.
50 people.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it's quite a lot, but I found that half the people you talk to, you're not going to get anything valuable from. Right? The way you overcome that is you talk to more people. Okay. You don't try and figure out ahead of time who's good and who's bad, because that's not possible.
And what would you consider, maybe this is obvious, but what would you consider as like a good conversation and what's not a good conversation?
That's a great question. Okay. A great conversation, because the point of these interviews is not to have a conversation. Okay? That's something that people take a while to get used to. Conversations, they start on topics, they go to other topics, they roam around. These 30-minute calls are not conversations. They're interviews, okay? Ahead of time, ahead of the first call, you write down exactly the questions that you want to ask your tab members, okay? And I have some recommendations in the book, but you can customize your own questions. But my real recommendation is you ask the exact same questions to 50 people. Because by asking the exact same questions, including the ones that we talked about earlier, by asking the exact same questions, you become connoisseurs of the answers.
Yes.
Right? And you can tell, oh, this person said exactly the same as that person, or here's how they're different. And you say, well, someone from a large company says this, people from startups say this, right? And you start really getting into the details on what the difference between them are. If you just have conversations with people, then there's no way to analyze all that information.
That makes sense.
Okay, there's another thing that we haven't touched on here, which leads back to what I talked about earlier, the wide variety of personas, right? You need to include representatives from every type of persona that you're dealing with in your technical advisory board, right? You can't just talk to developers, right? If you have to talk to their managers, right? It differs by product, okay? You might have to talk to CTOs, you might have to talk to vice presidents of engineering, you might have to talk to CISOs, chief information security officer, right? You might have to talk to SREs, right? You might have to talk to platform engineering. There are all sorts of different specialties, right? And in my point of view, if they've ever written code for a living, they're a developer, okay? Because what makes developers different from everyone else is that the culture around writing code is different. And it's this extremely skeptical, prove it to me culture.
And in terms of categorizing as developers, is that important because you would group everyone?
Everyone, yeah. And I have to say, even though CTOs and VPEs, right, they're technically not writing code anymore, they used to write code.
Yeah.
Culturally, they're developers, and you need to talk to them because they will have problems. And often the problems, first of all, no one knows what anyone else's problems are.
Yeah.
This is just the truth. You can sit next to someone for 10 years, okay, and yet you're asked, what are his or her top 3 problems? You'll have no idea. You know your own problems. You know them pretty well because you were thinking about them last night at 2 a.m. But your friends' problems, you've got no idea, right? And if you talk inside the organization, there's an engineer, a development manager, a CTO, their problems are completely different.
Yeah.
And if you want to design a product, an enterprise technology product, you need to understand the problems at each of these different levels so that you can come up with value propositions that are appropriate to each person.
And how many of each persona would you say? Because you've got like 50 altogether.
Well, the first thing to do, right, is when you start off, make a hypothesis about every persona that could possibly be interacting with you.
Interesting.
Okay? Most of the companies I deal with, they come up with a list of around 12 different personas. Okay. Then when you're constructing your tab, you need to invite multiple representatives of each of these personas and interview them.
And multiple is like
at least
5?
2.
Okay.
Ideally 5.
Okay.
You get what you can get. Okay. And then you discover if they answer in effectively the same way to your questions, then you can collapse the personas together. So you might think the VPE and the CTO are different personas, but when you ask them these questions, they give you fundamentally the same answers. Okay, from your perspective, it's the same thing. It's the technology executive. Okay. So after going through this process, it's not unusual for someone to think they have 12 personas, but no, by the end of the first 30 days, they know they really only have 3 or 4.
Yeah. So I feel like if we're talking to founders, I feel like the reaction is, okay, 50 people, once a month, half an hour, and there's always work around the time,
They
right?
think, oh my God,
That's
this
like
is
my
so much
full-time
work.
job almost.
Yes, this is so important. This is what founders do. This is what founders do. I'm repeating it because a founder is not like an executive at a miniature corporation. Startups are not miniature corporations, okay? Corporations exist to execute a proven business model. And you bring in executives who are expert at their functional area to execute. Whereas what founders do is founders are searching for a new business model. This is not original to me. This is Steve Blank, right? And as a founder, how do you search for a new business model? Well, you need to talk to people. You need to talk to a wide variety of people in a variety of different roles and then analyze what you've learned. This is the essence of being a founder. Okay, if you're just a technologist and you're cranking out code and you don't care about finding out why people need to adopt your product, then you're not an entrepreneur, you're a hobbyist. Nothing wrong with being a hobbyist, but don't mistake it for being an entrepreneur. Am I going on thin ice here?
This is great. I wanted to let it sit. I feel like let's scratch the previous soundbite. I feel like that's the soundbite. If you're worried that you have so much code to write, you have so many things to do, and you don't have time for this, then you're actually kind of thinking about this backwards.
Correct. Correct. Yes. And there are some definitions here that I like to use out. Like inventors are people that create new technology. Innovators use new technology to do old processes in new ways. That's the very definition of the word innovator. So if you're in a startup, you could be an inventor, you're probably not an innovator. Your customers are the innovators. They're using your technology to do some existing business process some way new, right? Some way better, right? Even though I hate that word, that it just means all the different ways that it could be changed, okay? But then the other important thing is, what is an entrepreneur, right? An entrepreneur is someone who discovers a need and fills it. Discovering a need is half the battle, right? If you're just inventing stuff without discovering the need for it, that's a hobbyist. Nothing wrong with hobbyist inventors, but they are not entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's the job, I guess.
Yes, that's the essence of the job.
Yeah, there's a soccer player, football player in England or in the UK, and every time like someone says like, oh, this guy's great at defending or whatever, he's like, that's your job. Anyway, I feel like that's it. Yeah. It's like like actually talking to users. Like if we say a company's good at that or a founder's good at that, that's your job.
This is the founder job.
Yeah.
Okay. And that the kind of a founder's job is kind of to put themselves out of a job, right? Yeah. At some point, you could say, I figured out the business model. I figured out what product we need. and I figured out how we're going to get it to market and why people are going to use it and how we're going to support them, okay? And then I can just hire experienced executives for each of these functional areas, right? And leave, because the company will just run on its own. Okay? I don't actually recommend that, but that's theoretic. But people do that, and that's theoretically possible. The companies that continue to innovate, right, are the ones that maintain the founder at the very top. Paul Graham just wrote an amazing essay about that.
We got it in.
What timing?
Founder mode.
Yeah, this is what founder mode means. Founder mode means you are paying attention, right? Not to everyone, but to a certain set of people that you are using to figure out where the market is going so that you can make changes to your product, to your company, to your go-to-market model, whatever needs to be changed, right? To go fit that new emerging need in the market.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the difference between an executive-driven company, which exists to perfectly execute a proven business model, and a founder-driven company that's constantly searching for a new and emerging business model.
I really want people to do this. I feel like I want to do it for myself. I'm like, I put my hands up, like I have not been doing this, and it seems so obvious. And so when you explain it like this, it's like,
when I explain it, it sounds like, why haven't I done it? But yeah,
Yeah.
It's hard because it's a change in cultural mindset.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm an engineer. I'm a good engineer. I'm a brilliant engineer. I see solutions to products. I should be able to create solutions to this product, right?
Or I feel like even the more common one, because let's give people the credit of like, they are like, you know, they're not just building a solution because they've seen the problem themselves. And so they're like, I'm an expert in this problem because I experienced it themselves. But I think it's still, people need to do this, right?
Yeah, you're right. Just because you have an idea does not make you an expert.
Yeah.
It means you have an idea.
Yeah.
All right. You get
Or
to be
even
an
if you've
expert. You can
experienced-
study the
even if,
idea.
like-
You've experienced it. That means you've experienced the problem. Right. If you study it and you do research on it, right, you could become an expert. And when I say research is not something that you need, you know, a lab, you know, or a PhD to do. Yeah. Research, it's only two parts to research. Two. That's it, okay? Number one is you have an original idea. Number two is you publish. That's it, okay? You can do research in 15 minutes, okay? Because if you're in academia, well, you've got to publish papers and get them peer-reviewed, right? In our business, no one does that. I guess some people do that, but no one reads those papers, right? When I say publish, I mean put out a blog post.
Yeah.
Okay, put out a podcast. Just write on LinkedIn. This is the problem, right? And here's how I'm attacking it.
Yeah.
Because developers consume what other developers say. So be out there creating it, having original ideas and publishing on them. And then when other people appreciate what you're doing, they follow you, right? This is how you judge someone's credibility, okay? And how do you know if someone is an expert? Okay, it's if you put out original ideas and other experts in the field start quoting you and retweeting you and reposting you. That's how you know that they're an expert. And when you have a podcast and you interview other experts in the field and other people refer to these things, that's how you become a world expert. Because developers are very influencer driven. All right, and that's another thing I enjoy saying because it sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like, no, we're not watching, you know, Instagram models. You might be watching Instagram models, but that's something else, right? When I say developers are influencer driven, every developer has a set of O'Reilly books in their bookshelf.
True.
And we can go look at what's on I'd be very curious what's on your bookshelf, right? From O'Reilly.
Well, for one thing is that.
Oh, there it is. Great.
Yeah.
All right. And these are the influencers. You follow them on X. Okay. If they're giving a talk at a conference, you wanna hear what they're gonna say. You watch their videos on YouTube. Okay. Why? Because they've given you valuable information that has helped you do your job better. Okay. They've built trust over time by being an expert. Your goal as a startup founder is to become a developer influencer by being recognized as an expert on the problem you're solving, right? That's the model that I would hope you would aspire to.
And what is the path to become?
You just, okay, the first step, the first most important and inescapable step is you start posting on social media. Okay. And you don't talk about how your product works. Okay. You start talking about the problem.
Okay.
Where did the problem come from? Right? What's the state of the problem today? What are people doing about it? Where is it going? What are the influences that are making this problem worse? Okay. How could this problem develop in the future given all sorts of trends that we're seeing? Okay. You write about that. Okay. And what happens is when people engage with you on social media, you follow up with them and invite them to join your technical advisory board. And then you talk to them. And every time you have a technical advisory board interview, you say, oh, I got a good idea from this interview, because there's at least one idea from every interview. Yeah. Anonymize it, right? Summarize it in a small amount of words, and you put it out on social media. And someone else will engage with you. And you reach out to them. You say, I want to talk to you, right? This is how you, you start by searching blind on LinkedIn. It's hard. And then you build up a social media presence as you establish yourself as an expert on this problem. When people respond, you reach out to them, talk to them.
Yeah.
Okay. Put out what you learned. Okay. And then you will slowly start establishing a reputation as, oh, here's this person who is studying this problem.
Yeah.
Right. When people have this problem, you might get referred to them. Hopefully, they'll start following you. If you've learned something useful about the problem, they'll get something useful from it. They'll engage with you. You bring them onto your tab. You learn more.
Yeah.
It's a virtuous cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds actually a lot more accessible than the pure fact of like being an expert, because I feel like when you're solving a problem that you're not being very specific on, you could end up down an area that you're actually not an expert.
Here's the key. You could go buy 100 books and lock yourself in some dusty library and say, I'm going to make myself an expert.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess this is what people used to do in the old days, 20 years ago. They used to go get PhDs in this, right?
Yes.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
All right. Instead, become an expert with a problem by interacting with people who experience the problem, have the problem, maybe they solve the problem every day.
And that's because people care about, people don't care about like clever things. They care about actually solving their problem. And
that's correct, right? And remember, right, vendors, 0 credibility, developers, 100% credibility. So if you say, I'm an expert, I've studied this problem for decades, and here's the answer, like I'm doing in my book apparently, right? You think about how you would believe that. And if you had someone else that said, I talked to 100 experts in this field, and here's what they widely agree on, it's like, I'm ready. You tell me, I want to know that.
Yeah. I think you actually told me to I should write an article that's like, I spoke to 100 DevTools founders.
Well, first talk to 100. Yeah, you have talked to 100
well, I didn't follow
scaling DevTool experts.
I didn't follow your process though, but.
Well, my process is designed to help you. You can escape from it whenever you need to. But if you don't know what to do, follow the process.
Well, actually, something I realized, like when I did start looking into writing that, and one of the things I realized is it's really hard because it's not structured. For me to actually gain those insights and like to narrow it down, it's like everything is kind of chaotic and swirling.
Yeah, that's why I like to teach people. You see, if you had this exact same 5 questions that you asked every single person, you'd now have a structure to do an analysis on.
Yeah.
So do that.
Yeah, that's true. I actually wanted to go back to the tab and just ask like 2 questions.
Ask me anything.
So the first one was, if there's multiple co-founders, should they split this, or should they do like one person takes the lead on this?
Yeah, as long as it gets done, I've seen success both ways. Okay, so both people can jump into this and, with permission, ask permission to record. Okay, when you do it, 99% of people say yes. Okay. After you make a recording, make a transcript and keep that inside the company, keep it confidential, but share it among all of the founders. All the founders should be able to know what's going on with every member of your tab. So you can definitely have multiple people share the work, or it's not atypical for founders to split up and say one founder, isn't comfortable talking to people. They're going to focus on writing code. The other founder is going to take care of the go-to-market, and they're going to do all the interviews.
Yeah, that makes sense. The second question is, which I think is going to be, I would imagine people at home, that there are some people who will listen and they'll say, this makes sense. This is a good thing, but we have customers, we have users, we're growing, we're busy, great idea, but it doesn't apply to us. Do you think that?
First, for any startup, if you have users and you have customers and you're growing, congratulations.
Okay.
Right? You're not doing it wrong.
Okay.
Okay. The question is, can some of these techniques help you?
Okay.
Right? And that's for you to decide, right? One of the risks that every company faces, startup or not, is you get captured by your customers, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Clayton Christensen is a Harvard Business School professor. He wrote about this in The Innovator's Dilemma. He says because you have customers and you love your customers and you talk to your customers a lot and they are solving one set of problems. And so you design all of your future products to solve their problems.
Yeah.
And what you miss is the fact that there's another set of people for whom your technology could be solving a different problem, okay? Perhaps one that's much bigger. And, Clayton Christensen has plenty of examples of companies that were really good in their business, but failed to realize that there was a whole new set of customers that are coming along. Like, why is it today that DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, didn't ever make a PC, right? They owned the mini computer market, right? And they kept putting out better and better mini computers. This is probably dating me because I actually programmed PDP-11 back in the day, right? And they never jumped to PCs because they thought they were toys. And their customers used PDP-11s and they were serious people and they completely missed out, okay? The other examples are the floppy, this is from Clayton's own book. He talks about the floppy disks and then solid state storage, right? And the disk manufacturers, right? They're used to always sell to PCs, right? And we're making the floppy disk better every year, right? And they missed the idea that there could be whole new devices with solid state, right? Like all the early music players, right? And that market was 10 times bigger than all of the floppy disks going into every PC, okay? They could have been there, but they didn't. They didn't see how their technology could develop.
So they should, for most founders, you would expect that whatever stage they're at, they've got a technical advisory board.
Okay, so you don't have to call it a technical advisory board, okay? But it's kind of the difference we just discussed about founder mode versus executive mode.
Yeah.
Right? Executives are cruising along, executing a business model, and every year they do it faster and cheaper.
Yeah.
Whereas founders are always looking for the next business model. And the only way to look, they're not looking for it with microscopes or with telescopes, they're looking for it by talking to people.
Yeah.
And in our business, that means talking to developers, which is not something that comes easy to anyone.
That makes total sense. And I think that in that talk that you're referencing, that essay, he references Brian Chesky a lot from Airbnb. And Airbnb is something that we would all, I would be surprised if anyone listening has a more valuable company that they're building than Airbnb, and if he's still doing founder mode.
Story, I love the Airbnb stories, right? And for people that don't know how it got started, right? The founders spent an extraordinary amount of time working with their early customers, right? Both their early renters and their early apartment providers, okay? And Chesky himself talks about the example. He went to see the first 10 people that rented their apartments on Airbnb. He went to see every one of those first 10 face-to-face, okay? One of them hauled out a notebook and said, hey, every renter that I've had in this apartment, I've taken notes about how long they stayed, what they liked and didn't like about the apartment, and why they rented with us. Would you like to see that notebook? And Chesky said, yes. And like that was the first Bible of Airbnb. And I think
Really?
that was the interview in which he learned that you need to take photos, that no one rents apartments that just have textual descriptions.
And then they would take the photos
And then they learned
for
people
people.
take crappy photos. So the first thing Airbnb did was they contract with photographers to make sure they had high quality photos of apartments and houses.
And he wouldn't have known that without.
Unless he went and talked to people.
Yeah. So, okay. So it might look different that you're kind of more like walking the factory floor to sort of situation of like, well, I suppose actually no, factory is actually.
Well,
like,
okay, there's another story about Steve Jobs. I mean, there are lots of Steve Jobs stories, and some of them might actually be true. Right? One of which is that he used to get out of his uniform and then lurk in the Palo Alto Apple store. Here he was, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and he'd forbid the staff from pointing him out or even looking at him. And he'd just hang out in the corner and see how people interacted with all the stuff they had for sale.
Yeah.
Right. Imagine the CEO of a Fortune 500 company just spending a couple hours in a retail store just observing. It's that important. That's founder mode.
Yeah. So undercover boss kind of situation.
Yeah. Except it's not the employees you're worried about. It's your customers and users. Remember, in developer business, often the customer and the developer and the user are two completely different people. And when I say different people, I mean they have different sets of problems.
Yeah.
And you need to have a value proposition for both the developer and for the person that signs the checks if they're not the same person.
Yeah. Yeah, this is amazing. So I'm going to say my takeaways and just like there's a summary because I really feel like this one is actually like people really should be like, for me, I'm going to be following this. So it's like build up your technical advisory board. So about 50 people of like different personas and kind of like narrow it down, set up monthly 30-minute calls with them and have like a series of questions that's, you know, I mean, you've got them examples in the book that you work through, such as, and it's very much like problem driven. What would that mean to you? And the third one that you said,
what is making it worse?
Yeah.
What's the change in the environment?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let me go in on a couple things, right? One of which is when are you done, right? After 6 months, you're done with the tab. And the answer is not every tab member lasts 6 months.
Okay.
Some drop off because they don't want to participate anymore. Some you drop off because you think you've learned everything you can from them. Okay. I think in an ideal situation, you're always recruiting new tab members. Okay. In my ideal of a situation, a tab founder would talk, a company startup founder would talk to a tab member every day, 5 days a week, 30 minutes for the rest of the life of their company.
Yeah.
Right. And this is how you stay in touch with what people are thinking, not just your customers. Some of your tab members can be users and customers, and some people are not yet customers, right? To learn what their real problems are and how they change.
Yeah.
So it goes on forever.
Yeah. Well, it also reminded me one thing that you say is don't pay people for this, right?
Oh, yeah. No, a tab member is not a paid role, right? That's an important point because there are some people, first of all, there are other approaches to startups that are not focused on developers, right? And there's such a thing as a customer advisory board, right? Which is a related but distinct idea. Sometimes to get business people on board, you have to sign up them to add them to your customer advisory board. And sometimes they will insist on payment. The closer you are to revenue producing activities, like if you want sales VPs to join your customer advisory board, they're going to want to be comped. Okay. It's just a fact. And it'll probably be worth it. Okay. But developers in general, no one turns down money, but this is not a paid position. The principle is appreciation, not compensation. Okay. If you pay people cash, it'll feel like they're being bribed, and no one likes that. On the other hand, you have stickers. Tell me, do you have stickers?
I do.
Socks, a hat, coffee mug, T-shirt.
We are a very
hoodie.
frugal version. I have so many from other people.
Stickers.
I've got a million.
You've got
people.
stickers.
Yes.
Okay. This is what they're for.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not for showing off your own startup. It's so you can give it to tab members so that they can brag to their peers that, oh yeah, I'm on the technical advisory board of this startup. And later on, when they make it big, they can brag about how they got involved when you were still tiny.
Okay,
Appreciation, not compensation.
that's brilliant. That's really useful.
I could go on and on.
No, this is so okay. But I think we've got that. We've got technical advisory board. I think there's a lot of stuff there. A lot of work to do, and then that can form the basis of the content that you put out.
Well, okay. Oh, okay. So we're just getting started with the tab, right? Okay. So when you do these tab interviews, right, then you need to analyze them, right, and then turn what you've learned into a story. Okay, because remember early on I talked about the difference between a grocery list and a story.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that you've talked to a lot of people and you've learned what their problems are, all right, and what their fears are and what their goals are, all right, put this in a story format. Stories are not complicated, okay, but they are essential. They can be short. They can be 6 sentences.
What's an example of a story?
Okay, let me tell you the structure of a story. And when I say tell you, I'm just telling you something that you already know, because at least in 9th grade English, it's covered in the US, okay? A story has 3 parts. And some of you know this, and some of you have degrees in literature, and you're thinking, he's just crazily simplifying it. That's true. I've tried to simplify this as absolutely much as possible, okay? But all stories have 3 parts. Okay, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Okay, the beginning of a story introduces the characters. Okay, there's always a hero, and it's not the founder of the startup, right? The hero is your user. Okay, there's always a villain, and the villain is probably the most important character in your story, and you should spend a lot of time thinking about who your villain is. Okay, then there's a wise advisor.
Villain is the problem.
The villain is the problem, or something that's causing the problem.
Yeah.
All right, something that you can personify out there. And villains, they have to be easily identifiable, universally loathed. Okay, and make them as colorful as you can. Disney knows villains, right? One of the characteristics of Disney villains, they're colorful, they're intelligent, and they're proactive. Okay. Because if your story doesn't have a villain, it's not a story. It's boring.
What was the villain for, I think you've told me before, for Neo4J? It was like the...
the villain was connected. Well, the story was interesting. The villain was a graph data, but not a graph. The villain was a relational database, right? That relational databases, they're massive. They're everywhere. They're good for many things, okay? But they don't help you when you have connected data, right? Yeah. In fact, they slow you down. They're hard to maintain. They offer poor performance on your most important queries, okay? And so you're never going to get rid of them, right? How are you going to solve the problem? And the answer was, we're going to give you a gift, right? So you have a hero, you've got a villain, you have a wise advisor, okay, which is either Gandalf or Obi-Wan Kenobi, or you. This is what startups, the startup is the wise advisor. That's how they fit into the story, okay? And there's always a gift. And the gift can be a magic ring, it can be a lightsaber, or it can be a piece of software. Could be invisibility cloak, or it could be a piece of software. And I'm guessing for most of the people watching this, it's going to be a piece of software, right? And then the other important part of the beginning of a story is there's an inciting event, right? That the villain is doing their evil things in the background, but something specific, right, causes the hero, who is always reluctant, to say, I need to go address this villain, right? And it could be, dwarves showing up on the doorstep, it can be a message from a princess, right? Or it can be, here's a problem, that my relational database can't process this complex data with insufficient time. Right? They're all inciting events. And then the hero is off on their journey, guided by, and then that's it. That's all that makes the beginning of a story. The middle of a story, okay, the hero on his way to, defeat the villain meets an obstacle. Using the advice from the wise advisor and or the magic gift, right, is able to overcome this obstacle and move on. Repeat.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why the middle of every adventure book or science fiction book is so long. Okay. It's all about the hero just getting to the next challenge, obstacle. What do we do? The obstacle's terrible. Oh, here's the gift. Here's the advice. We're able to overcome it.
Yeah.
Repeat over and over again. Okay. And then you finally get to the end.
Yeah.
Okay. And what happens in the end? The hero using everything that the hero has learned from overcoming all these obstacles and the advice from the wise advisor and the gift confronts the villain, right? Defeats the villain, or at least chases the villain off for now. The villain may show up in the sequel. Okay. And then the hero is transformed, gains some wisdom, and then shares that wisdom with the community that they came from. Right? So you think about, if your users could actually solve this problem that you are now the expert in, right? What would their life be like? What could they achieve? And you need to interview your users who achieve that, right? And then that's what their peers want to know, right? Once I solve this problem, then what will my life be like? Once I'm able to, correctly, produce all this video, right? How will my life be changed?
Yeah. And that becomes the content that you put out?
Well, okay, so that becomes the part. That's the wisdom part. So that's the end of a story. What does the story end with? It ends with sharing wisdom. Right? So you can write it up as a case study. Right? But whenever you do a case study, right, and this is something else that drives me nuts, okay? So a user says, I love this company, it's great, right? That's a terrible quote that informs no one of anything, okay? But when your quote is from a user that says, I was able to increase my video throughput 80 times. I have no idea if that means anything. But that creates desire among that user's peers that says, I also want to increase my video throughput by 80x, okay? Now I'm incented to actually learn about this piece of software because I know what I can do at the end, right? The great quote, no one's incented to do anything. That's like, it's probably your brother-in-law.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, whatever.
Right? By being able to increase my video throughput 80x, my company is a unicorn. Or I can go home and see my kids at 6 p.m. Whatever the object of the real object of desire is.
And so when we talk about, like you were saying, to post every day, it's like this sort of the stories and the lessons the gifts that people got from the advice.
The gifts, the challenges. I like challenges. Challenges make great posts. So-and-so had a challenge. Here's how he overcame it.
Interesting.
You don't need to post the whole story every day. You just need to post one little bit of it. Right? This is a very old way of communicating. Right? Before the novel, right? Every story was posted in installments. Right? It's only when publishing changed that we used to get that. Now we get these 200-page books.
True. Yeah. That's a good point. That makes sense. Okay, so if people are doing these things, they're going to get pretty far with.
You will get better if you have a story, at least have a reason for people to be interested in you. Okay? Now you got to map out the journey that all of your prospects are going to make as they adopt your technology. And that's something that everyone does wrong. Let me tell you why they do it wrong, right? This is the lead funnel, right? Developers are not leads. I'm going to say this again. Developers are not leads. The lead funnel was not meant for you. The lead funnel was a brilliant idea designed to model how business executives adopt technology. Okay, I'm talking about the awareness, interest, consideration, decision, and you map how business executives go through each one of these phases and what you need to do to move them from each phase to the next, okay? Works great for executives, not for developers, okay? So I have a completely different model because I've been a developer. I've studied developers about how developers adopt technology, right? It's not a funnel, okay? I call it the dream sequence, okay? And that stands for discovery, research, evaluation, activation, and membership. And I can talk about each one of these things in exhaustive detail if you're so interested.
Can we get the, I guess, like the...
Yeah, okay, I'll just talk about the first one, right?
Okay.
Which is technology discovery. How, what do you start with? You're not gonna buy ads, right? You're not gonna buy billboards, right? How do people learn about you? Well, it just so happens, right, that you're a developer. Everyone watching this is a developer, okay? And every developer has a fear. And the fear that they have many fears. Well, the fear that's common is that the years or maybe decades they've spent acquiring skills will be made obsolete because the technology is always changing, and they'll be of no value to their organization or any organization, right? So to combat this fear, every developer has a personal technology discovery loop. Okay, there are certain things you do every day, every week, every year. You go to certain conferences, you read certain blogs, you go to certain meetups, okay? And the reason you're doing this is you want to stay abreast of what's going on in your field, right? Part of this is driven by ambition, part of it is also driven by fear. And so that means that unlike business executives, developers already have this loop. You need to understand for your particular group of developers that you want to influence, what is their technology discovery loop? And can I get my story and insert it into their discovery loop, right? So that they find it and are interested in it.
And does this come back to the tab a little bit?
Because how do you figure out what the tab is? You ask them. You ask them. There's no other way to do it.
Where do you discover stuff?
Exactly. You describe that loop and says, what do you do, right? And what conferences, because in every technology area, there are specific ways that this technology is advancing. There's no substitute for finding people in the field and asking them how they find out about new technology. And the reason you have to ask so many is that any few people can give you off-the-wall answers, right? If you talk to 50, you'll have a pretty good sense of where most people are getting their information from, right? They're also getting their information from influencers, and you can figure out who are the key influencers, okay? And then another great research project is figure out who are the top 40 influencers in my particular field, okay? Write down their names, and then go search them, or just ask ChatGPT, where did they publish on social media, right? Are they all on X? Right? Are they all on LinkedIn? Maybe they're all in one Reddit, subreddit, right? If that's the case, fantastic. They've already assembled your audience for you. All you need to do is come up with a story that's interesting to the crowd that is already appearing there.
Yes, this is, I hear some people marketers have said to me that they ask like the team, like what, the target market, like say iOS developer, like what newsletters do you subscribe to or whatever? And it always struck me as like, that's a great idea actually, to like ask people rather than to just Google like top iOS newsletters or something.
Would you believe it if you Google top iOS newsletter and then some vendor said, oh yeah, I'm the number one iOS newsletter. I'm the number one iOS newsletter.
Yeah, exactly. It's like usually one of them has made the list and like, so that struck me as like a good idea, but this seems like an even better idea to just do it like systematically. And you just, because I always, even like, I used to kind of run a newsletter and I feel like with scaling DevTools and stuff, I've kind of seen this sort of thing and it's like, it would be so hard to know like even the value of like sponsoring a certain thing. And I feel like this would actually help you a lot because if you know that even if the circulation is not high, but key people that like it keeps coming up again and again and again. It's like, this is actually really influential, even though the numbers don't.
Oh, let me tell you something that makes it even more complicated and important, okay, which is not everyone is an early adopter. Okay, so you think you've defined who your ideal user is and what the problem they have, right? But only a small percentage of them are early adopters. So you might find someone who is absolutely perfect for your product in every way, but when you talk to them, they say, yeah, I can't wait to use it. Call me back when you have 10 reference customers. And this is personality. There's nothing you're going to say that changes whether they're an early adopter or not. And so that's another reason why you need to talk to so many people.
I heard someone say the other day that they ask their or like potential, I won't say leads, developers, like when was the last time they worked with a startup, like bought something from a startup?
That's a great question. And what was the answer? I'm dying.
Well, no, I think it's just like he would just like use that as a filter. So if the answer is like, oh,
never,
actually we haven't, then probably they're not going to suddenly start buying from you.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got we've got dream. So discovery,
and then research. So someone discovers you in their technology loop, right? And then they say, "Oh, I'm going to research this." And usually that takes place on your website. Okay. In other words, that I've made a decision. I'm going to invest 30 seconds of my valuable time in understanding what you do.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're really good in that first 30 seconds, maybe I'll extend that to 2 minutes. Maybe I'll extend that to 5 minutes. Max. Okay. And in that allotted time, you need to explain your story. Okay. Who is the villain? What the pain that you solve? What are the symptoms of the pain? Because someone might not realize they're in pain until you tell them what the symptoms are. Okay. And what the inciting event is that would cause them to actually use your product. Okay. And the goal is they're spending research, they're spending 30 seconds on you. You want to take up a spot in their brain. Okay. Because are they going to go through the rest of the adoption process? No. Right? They're going to get back to work. All they did was they were in their technology discovery loop. They found something interesting. They went and did research. I learned something. Now back to work. Okay. This is what kills the lead metrics for developers. It's developer curiosity that is driving this. And it's great and it's wonderful. Okay. But they are not leads just because they're coming to your website. And remember, you can track website visitors, you can get Google Analytics in real time, watch them come and go, right? You want to just live in their brain, and you want to hopefully maintain some type of relationship with them, right? Maybe they follow you on social media, okay? Give them something easy for them to do to stay abreast of what you're going on, because you want to be reminding them that you exist, okay? Because when they do have that inciting event, right, that may be a day later, maybe that's a minute later, maybe that's a year later, right? You want to be the product or the company they recall, because then they're going to start evaluation. And evaluation is the next phase after research. And this gap between research and evaluation is what kills most B2B marketers. People are coming to the website, but they're not evaluating the product. That's right, they're not evaluating it. They just did research on it to figure out what it was. Maybe they'll never have the inciting event.
But they have like some memory of like,
if I ever get this inciting event, then go, look up this product again. Okay. Now, evaluation also doesn't mean what you think it means, right? Evaluation, people want to believe that I make certain claims about product on my website, and people want to evaluate it to see if it actually meets those claims, right? That would be so easy, but that's not what evaluation means, okay? Evaluation from your actual software developer's point of view is, my shop is a unique snowflake, right? There are 40,000 frameworks, tools, libraries, and platforms out there, and we have a unique configuration that no one else has. And I need to understand, if I bring in a new piece of technology, what's it going to break? Because if it breaks anything that's part of my essential existing pipeline, then I'm done with it. I'm assuming that if you're in business, you do what you say you do, right? But are you going to do it for me, right? That's what an evaluation. And the constraint on evaluation, okay, is it has to be done in a limited amount of time with no support, right? Here's the model that I tell people about, and this is from my own experience, right? This is a Fortune 500 architect, right? They've been grappling with this problem, right? And on Friday afternoon, they go home, none of their approaches have solved it. And they say, I remember I read about this startup that has a different approach. Okay, so they're going to spend Saturday and Sunday with a burner email account downloading your software, trying to get it to work. Because if they can get it to work, Monday morning stand-up, they're going to tell everyone, hey, I found a possible approach. Right? If they can't get it to work by Sunday afternoon, they're not going to say anything, and the evaluation is over.
That is very interesting.
Yeah. And are you ready for an anonymous burner email doing self-download over the weekend and not calling anyone to get your software up and fully functioning in an enterprise environment?
Yeah, no. That's so interesting. And you would just see like at random.
Yeah, I'm begging you,
thing.com.
don't block gmail.coms because people from the largest companies don't want to give out their email. They don't want salespeople calling them. So they create burner emails just for downloading software.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, almost like the more legit they are, maybe the more likely they are to.
More likely they are to come up with a set of fake emails that they'll never use again.
Yeah,
Because they know people are just going after them. Right? You can't reveal that you're a senior architect at Goldman Sachs.
I was literally going to say Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, you'll have every enterprise sales guy calling you incessantly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so discovery, research, evaluation,
activation. Okay, so I've made the decision to bring in this technology, right? How fast can we go from I've made the decision to do it to I'm actually getting value, right?
Yeah.
Speed is the key. And the book that is a must read on this is Kathy Sierra's Making Badass Users, right? Because when you first bring technology in, right, you suck at it and you know you suck, right? And the question is, how fast can you go from I suck at this to I'm actually a badass at this, I'm good at this.
Yeah.
Okay. Not how fast can you get it installed and working. How fast can you make the user feel like they are the master of this, right? Speed is the key. Okay. And then the last part of the sequence is membership, because developers, they hate to buy, but they love to join. Okay. And I talk about community. There are people who study communities, right? Weeks has a book. The Art of Community is another great book, right? Developer communities are their own thing, but this is where they fit in the sequence, is that you need to have a community, right? Because developers want to talk to other developers, not who are using your product, but who are solving the same problem.
Yeah.
Great communities are formed around people that are trying to solve a problem together, not people trying to use a product together.
Yeah.
So that's it. Dream, D-R-E-A-M.
Dream.
That replaces the funnel.
Okay, that's amazing. Okay, that makes so much more sense than the traditional.
Yeah, this
funnel.
is not rocket science. This comes from observing people over long periods of time.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not rocket science, I guess, but it's very difficult, and I feel like I like the way that you framed it, because for me the challenge is just knowing what things not to do and how to have like a structure, because it's like just to sit down and be like, oh mate, there's so many things I could be doing. Like, that's the heart of it. That's the hardest part about being a founder, okay, is every day when you wake up, you make a single decision, how am I going to spend the hours in today? Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
If you nail that, everything else will fall into place.
Yeah.
But that's really hard for people to do.
Yeah. I feel like that's the
hardest thing.
Yeah. And I think you've done a very good job of helping people to have a framework of how to spend that time. So yeah, I've already recommended this publicly, but like, it's a great book. It really is. So
great. Well, I'm going to do some shameless self-promotion here. I've built a course around this book, and it's a 12-week course. It's cohort course, so it's not self-paced. You learn at my pace, not your pace, because I will push you through. And you also learn from your peers as you do it. So if you're interested in a course, visit my LinkedIn. I think there's a link to the course from there. It's built on Mighty Networks, which is a great platform.
Amazing.
Launching in October 2024.
Yeah, and you've already, I'm going to get you on public record that you've promised me that I can join it as well, right?
Yes, I will send you the link.
Yeah. Okay, so hopefully see some of you on it. Adam, do you want to just say like any like websites and stuff that you've got to go to? I guess Adam Frankl on LinkedIn.
My LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything starts from there.
Cool.
Right. I'm not going to set up a separate website trying to sell people things.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. And that was really, really
It's a
incredible.
pleasure. And actually, this was more fun than I thought it was.
I will take that as a compliment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam. And thanks everyone for listening.